for joining us today for this panel on robotics and trust in AI. We have three esteemed panelists today. We have Professor Zhu, who is the founder of Deep Robotics, a leading innovator in autonomous robotics system, and an associate professor at Zhejiang University. His expertise spans robotics engineering, artificial intelligence, and the practical deployment of legged robotics and autonomous vehicles, with a strong focus on bridging advanced research and real-world application. We also have Minister Ingabire, who serves as Rwanda's Minister of ICT and Innovation. She is also on the board of trustees at the World Economic Forum. With a background in engineering and public policy, she's been instrumental in advancing Rwanda's reputation as a continental leader in digital innovation. We have Kishor Patil, who is co-founder and CEO of KPIT Technologies, a global leader in autonomous software and mobility solutions. Patil has overseen the development and integration of AI-driven systems in autonomous vehicles and smart mobility platforms worldwide. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, many of us have seen robots in and around this conference. We are now accustomed to seeing robots in our hotels in China, robots making our coffees, robots playing football. Now, surveys show that Chinese consumers have higher levels of trust in AI than in the US or Europe. Qiuguo, could you start me off? Why do you think this is? What do you think has made China more pro-technology, more pro-AI than the rest of the world?
Okay, wait a moment. Can translate to Chinese? Does that not work?
Or maybe we can start. Kishor
we should
can come on to you.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. I'm glad to be here with the team. I think if you look at overall two things, if you look at the trust and then you look at the use of AI, China is of course leading in both trust as well as the usage of AI. Absolutely in autonomous application, and very closely followed by India, both in terms of trust as well as usage. And if you look at most of the other European countries, and then if I may say, cover say Japan, it goes down from the both perspective, trust as well as the usage perspective. So if you really look at, I think there are 2 to 3 things I can put together. One is the knowledge of AI specifically. I mean, both India and China has engineers. They both work in AI. Both were good at mathematics. I think that understanding actually makes it very different, and that's why you can see both in terms of trust as well as the application. These countries are ahead, and just followed by 2, 3 things. One is the other trend is the younger the people, they are more trusting and they are making more use. Okay. And the population in both the countries is younger population. Mm-hmm. I think with both these things, actually, that is what is happening. But I must say that if you look at the other part, even outside India and China, wherever people have to use an application, they are comfortable. But if they have to use it for their personal use, then the acceptance is less. I think this is how it looks like.
Okay, a bit of a bifurcation there. You cited a survey there. I just think it's worth highlighting it again. You said that the statistics in China, 72% of the population
Absolutely.
were pro-AI. In India, it was 74%. And in Japan, it was 34%.
Yes.
So obviously, we've got an age dynamic going
on. As well as...
there as well. Professor Zhu, just coming back to you, could you explain the background of why the Chinese population might be more pro-AI than some other countries?
All right.
Yeah.
I think there are some reasons from my perspective. First, Chinese government plays a very important role because after decades of development, after the reform and opening up, and China achieved a great development. And through collaboration, cooperation, learning from the world, we intook a lot of new technologies which boost the development of technology and science of China. In recent years, Chinese science and technology had a great leap forward. This year, you can see during the political meetings, the two sessions of this year, the first time Chinese government proposed the development of robotics and AI as one of the priorities of China. In Zhejiang province where I work also pays utmost importance to the development of robotics and AI. The local government requires the state enterprises, including government departments, they should open the possible use cases or their spaces to the high-tech enterprises so that they can give more opportunities for the high-tech companies to apply their latest technologies. So I think Chinese government does play important role in promoting the development of robotics and AI. About the younger generation compared to my generation or elderly generation, they have more knowledge, they have better education, and they are better connected than we are to the world, and they are more open-minded, and they also have their different expertise in some different specialties. So in recent years, you can see many young and important enterprises emerging. For example, this year, we call them like 6 high-tech enterprises, like the unicorns. They work on different fields, and for example, robotics and the brain interface and AI and the large language model. So I think the younger generation, they are prone to embrace AI. They know a lot of technologies and knowledge on AI. So they have great passion, and they want to make innovation to push forward development of AI and the industry. So I believe the younger generation in China is changing. They want to reshape to China. They are willing to have some collaboration with the leading enterprises, laboratories, universities of the world, and the general public of China. We want to try new things, new technologies, which can change our working environment and lifestyle. So from a personal perspective, I think the general public in China is willing to embrace new things. Yeah, thank you.
Both central and local governments encouraging AI adoption, the young population, the education system, and the kind of entrepreneurial environment in China is all kind of working together to create this pro-AI adoption environment. Minister Ingabire, could we come to the role of governments? I mean, speaking as a minister of ICT and innovation, what role do you think the government has to play in kind of preparing the population for AI?
Thank you very much. I think starting with some of the examples that we're hearing of China and India, we see a very strong role for governments in terms of really paving the way with the right regulatory environment that will enable some of these innovations to really take place. And so because today we're talking about trust, which is a critical aspect when it comes to how emerging technologies and innovations are really being, are adopted globally, government, because of the strong social contract that the government has with the people, is a big enabler in how people perceive this technology. And I'll use an example of Rwanda, where we were one of the first country to adopt the drone technology. And so when we did that, there were no regulations globally. And so I always say for us it was a choice between, do we wait until there is regulations already in place for us to adopt, or do we figure out what the need is? And the very first time we deployed these drones to deliver blood products to the rural areas, obviously it was met with excitement from the population, but also with anxiety on what are these machines all about? What is it that they are collecting? And so we took on a role as government to go out there and educate citizens who, in their communities, would bring a drone to them. They would look at it. They would, assess what it is all about, and they had enough time to be educated on what value it is going to create, and that's how the acceptance rate was able to grow. And this is not just only with drones. When I look at we have deployed countrywide what we call, in terms of road safety, we have automated systems that are able to track the speed limits for all vehicles. Again, we had to create that public awareness for our citizens. One, not to think that these robots that we are putting in place to track speed limits were not there just to penalize them, but we're really looking to make sure that there's safety on the road. And so we saw an 87% reduction of serious injury type of crashes, and that was very powerful, even in being able to communicate to users what that's all about. My last point on this is, as you think about regulation, it's always important to identify why are we using this technology and for what purposes. And that's why we've adopted what we call a performance-based regulation, where depending on the technology and what we're going to use it for, we're then able to craft regulations that are very specific to it, that will take into account privacy and security of the citizens, while also delivering the value that is needed.
Did you face any resistance from the population seeing these drones coming in? I mean, was there any destruction of them? Were people kind of protesting?
Well, I wouldn't say resistance or protest, but it was more of anxiety and questions around what is this all about? And so that's where the education and awareness really came in handy. And I like the point that you raised around, we're also, a country with a population over 70% are in the youth bracket. So you can imagine the excitement from the young people to be able to use these drones. But also when you look at the other much older population, trying to understand what this is all about. So it wasn't resistance, because there was a lot of effort that went behind the scenes around educating them. Why are we bringing these drones? What are they going to do? Are you worried that it will land on you as it flies across? What are the measures that we're putting in place? And it helps very much that as you continue to test and fly them, when they see the measures and levels that are being put in place, they gain that confidence over time. You don't build confidence or trust overnight, but at least it's really how you progressively are able to engage and understand where the fears the population has and what they're stemming from, and you're able to address that. And to a certain extent, for some, trust is also based on, are we going to lose jobs? When we deployed drones to deliver medical products to the rural population, one thing was clear: as we delivered these products, it didn't take away any job for a doctor. We still had the doctors doing their job. Even for the traditional way of delivering these products, which was through trucks and everything, it still continued for some of the bulky items that couldn't be transported using the drones. And so it was really more something that was coming in to augment and complement what was already existing, and that sort of built the trust.
Yeah, Kishor, this is a point you actually mentioned just before the panel started, right? Like the level of trust bifurcates it. It's focuses on different areas, but when people can see that it's working in concert with humans, in concert with experts, that's when you can kind of achieve that.
Absolutely. And to the point Minister talked about medical part, I think one of the big example is in the robotics, right? For the surgeries, it is adopted, but as long as the people think that a surgeon is doing it, they probably are not even realizing it. But at the same time, if something they have to do, I think, they have to use something for them, there are different aspects come in. If I can just add 1 or 2 points on this, is if you look at culturally, for example, on this point is, if you look at the Europe part, they are very, very worried about data part. They are very, very worried about privacy part. And they are also worried about, in case of car, they want to be they call it, it's a driver's car, right? They love driving. I think you see the adoption is little lesser in some of those as compared to the other countries. And I think overall I feel that cultural aspect is also playing a big way. And what Professor mentioned is where there is a little more entrepreneurial or little more, if I had to take experiential culture, I think these kind of things are more adopted.
As a skeptical Brit, it does fall to me to ask, is trust even something we should be striving for with AI and robotics? I mean, shouldn't we be preparing the population to take a skeptical approach, to be thinking about these issues of data privacy? Minister Ingabire?
So I think we should, because I think first it means education.
Yeah.
The second is awareness. The third, what Minister mentioned, very important in my view, is the purpose. Because when the electric cars came in, I think it was very clear that emission was the issue and we were trying this. I don't think at a high level people understand, but they don't understand what does actually it means. I think that is the second part. The third part I feel is as there is a wider adoption of the technology, and specifically if you look at in USA now the Waymo part, I think there is a better trust, you will see it. It is you don't have to do anything, but here, for example, in China, Robotaxi, people start looking at that, or what BYD has done and put into almost every car to some extent. That will build a trust, is what I feel.
I also believe trust is essential. We need to be able to strive for it, because trust will make or break how much adoption is going to happen in an economy when it comes to these technologies. And particularly when you look at AI and you look at all the biases and the risks that sort of shadow what the benefits and opportunities would be, if we don't strive to build trust, you have lower adoption, but at the same time, we can't afford not to uptake or adopt some of these technologies, because we've seen the catalytic effect it has to economic development. And so I think as policymakers, as industry players, as the developers of these new technologies, everyone has a role to play in making sure that we foster trust as we deploy these technologies.
Yeah. Speaking of deployment, Professor Zhu, I'm based in China. I'm a China tech reporter. So just after DeepSeek came out, I went down to Hangzhou and I just went to check out the kind of innovation ecosystem there and the ways in which DeepSeek had been deployed. And it really struck me there was like a before and an after moment with kind of how people were treating generative AI. Could you talk a little bit about the impact of DeepSeek and what you've seen before and after in terms of AI deployment?
Thank you. I think this is a very big issue. So now in China, we have many companies using large model development. In Spring Festival this year, we have seen a lot of companies of such kind. So we are also kind of shocked. In China, we also need innovation in large model. So the DeepSeek was invented, and we can see the breakthrough of China in AI and in large model, and it has brought down the cost of AI and large model, and this is very exciting to everyone, because today in China, in many technology respects, I think China has become a leader in the world. And the people in China are very eager for the new innovation. So this is why DeepSeek is very exciting for many Chinese people. Previously, we used AI tools. However, in China, we couldn't use part of the AI resources, and people paid to get access to the AI resources in the past. But now we have DeepSeek. This is very open and everyone can have access to DeepSeek. And this is beneficial to not even China and even to the whole world. So this is a big convenience for the whole world. And it also has broken down the past practice of paying to use the large model. So this is a large benefit for Chinese people and for the whole world.
There's one point I want to make. The trust is very important also from the perspective that we are talking about autonomous and we are talking about robots, which robots will be probably more widely used, and there will be autonomy which will be used in multiple things. So this trust is not necessarily only about autonomous car and the robots, but overall there will be many places where autonomy will be used. So it's important for to create that trust. And one point I missed is to your point, the trust part. If you look at the survey, there is one area where there is a lowest score in the trust, which is the transparency, government policies, etc. across the world. I'm not talking about any particular country. And that is also with the young population. They are using it, but still that score is less. And I think maybe more transparency across the world on this, having clear policy, purpose, I think that will help to build that. And that's why the trust is going to be very important, I believe.
Where do you see this going in 5-10 years? Just on, for example, autonomous driving. I mean, are we going to be capable of driving cars anymore? Are we going to maintain that skills? And to what extent, if we trust robots to do this, are we going to be able to trust ourselves in the future?
That's a very important point. I think as long as we learn some new skills, I think it is okay to let go of something. But to your point, we do believe that people think that with AI, people don't need to understand coding, but that is not true. Actually, you need very expert people to review what has come out of AI and actually bridge that gap. So I think those skills are important, I think, and need to be maintained. I'm just still talking about overall AI perspective.
Minister Ingabire, do you have a comment on that?
I think what we're going to see is, one, at the end of the day, there's the literature that we're seeing around the ability to empower and to train and skill human beings and people in a way that you can control this system. So it doesn't mean that you will have to not learn these skills, but it's rather to ensure that there's that interface where you can coexist with what the machines are able to do, and sometimes even take over, which will give even people more comfort that they are more in control of these machines as and when is needed, as opposed to you're leaving everything entirely to the machine to be able to do it for you. And I like the example you mentioned around coding, because much as we're seeing many of these AI tools being able to code and do a lot of this work, we just visited one of the facilities here where they were talking about virtual hospitals. Is it going to take away the need for doctors to be, groomed and educated in the field of medicine? I don't think so. But it's rather the ability to have much smarter doctors that are able to leverage these tools in making better diagnosis and also prevention at the same time. So what is going to change in the next 5 years is how we teach, skill, and train our people, so that in a world that we are relying heavily on technology and these machines, the coexistence can actually happen.
Okay. Yes, Professor.
Okay.
I also want to add some point. I really agree with what you have said. Actually, now what we are discussing is how human being and AI or machine can coexist and complement each other. So from the perspective of machine development, we should treat machine as a part of the labor force. However, in the next stage, people may be scared that the machine may have their own emotion and their own awareness. So that may lead to some conflict. So this is what we are scared of. But the ultimate goal is that we want to have a community where human and the machine can coexist. You talk about the trust. I think trust development is a long-term process. I went to Shenzhen several days ago. My friend came to drive me around, and he asked me, "Do you need a rest?" And he wanted to take a rest while he was driving, so I was kind of shocked. because for the autonomous systems in the car, I actually know some knowledge. I am kind of scared of this system. So I am concerned whether this autonomous system may lead to some unpredictable results. And also, I will give you another example. I took my child to the car of my colleague. So this car was fully autonomous, and we can have hands-off driving. And the children were very happy and excited about the autonomous car because the child knew nothing about this system. So if we give all of the autonomy to the machine or to the systems, so there can maybe some problems in the untrained scenario. So we need to have some reflection and examination on the safety and the function of the autonomous systems in the car. But it does not mean that we will not step forward because of the potential problems. So we are still embracing the autonomous world. My child grows up, he maybe think that autonomous system is a daily necessity because technology is changing and the technology is improving based on the conflicts, and the people's awareness and cognition is also improving. So
just like he got a bit apprehensive when the driver was sleeping, because I think all of us are on airplane. Airplane is autonomous most of the time. You don't know, but people think that there is a pilot. What is he doing? Nobody knows. But I think it's a question of that part. I think it could take.
There's an extremely entrepreneurial innovator in Beijing who's invented these gloves which you put on your steering wheel because you're supposed to always have your hands on the steering wheel, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're sat back there having a sleep, then you're... So anyway, there's this tech solution for all regulation. Professor Zhu, you mentioned this about kind of accidents and risks with robotics. Who do you think is responsible for accidents with autonomous technology? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the robot owner? Where do you kind of place that, that ownership of risk?
I think for both AI and robots, I think the ultimate goal is to have the general AI, which is very powerful. However, for the AI technology and robot technology have their own limits and the boundary. So in the case of accident, I think the car manufacturer and also the owner both should be held accountable, because for the people who know little about knowledge, they may be over-optimistic for the autonomous system. They may think that the system is very powerful. However, the autonomous system still has its limits and the boundary. So we needed to define the limits and also the boundary of the autonomous car. In China, we also have a lot of autonomous system. There are a lot of propaganda about this system. However, technology itself still has some limits. As mentioned by the panelists, we needed to convey the message of the limits of the technology to the public. We cannot exaggerate the power of these systems.
Perspective on that?
I think it would depend on what is the issue at hand. So assuming it's a defect that has to do with the system or the robot, then I think the manufacturers and the robot owners will have to take up the responsibility. But if it's an operational issue where it has been operated wrongfully, then the people that are operating it also have to take responsibility. And I believe when we talk about AI and safety, this is where there has to be a clear demarcation between what are the risks, what are those that are human controlled or human enabled, which ones are those that will be a result of how the system is designed, that in many ways may override what the intended use for these systems, and so being clear on demarcating what could possibly go wrong. I think we see it even when cars were introduced. There were things that manufacturers for cars were going to be responsible for, especially if it had to do with a defect that is causing accidents, and you're seeing a repetition of many of those across the board. But if it's the operator of the car, then there are also these road rules and everything that really place the responsibility on the user. So again, I think similar to autonomous systems, we'll have to be able to segment what are the dangers, what are the risks, who could have caused them or who could have prevented them, where does responsibility lie? But again, at the end of the day, this is where, with everything, it's really not trying to find who to blame when something goes wrong. It's actually the co-designing that has to happen, where whether it's the users or the creators of the technology, there's a conversation around what could go wrong, and what could go wrong, then you put in place the safeguards that are necessary to ensure that by all means we can try to limit as much as possible, minimize the different permutations of what would possibly go wrong. And these things are going to be updated, because to the point that we're making with AI is constantly learning. It's learning from our behaviors, human beings, it's updating itself. And so there'll be points where it's much more advanced in how it's thinking, but making sure that the community of researchers and developers of the technology are constantly updating all these safety measures that have to be in place is going to be very important in building the trust as we go along.
I'm going to open this up now to our audience. I'm going to invite you to ask questions in English or in Chinese. So do we have any? Yes, up here.
I was wondering if the panel could talk about, and going back to your point about being a skeptical Brit, and do we really want to trust? The potential to manufacture trust. One of the things that AI is really good is speaking very well. So I work for a publisher, and we've looked at ways in which we can use AI to assist in the review of papers. It's to assist referees, and so we get our AI to create a report about a paper that's come in, and we have 2 human reports, and then we ask the editor what they felt about the reports, and they always scored the AI very highly, and I think that's because it spoke really well. It had good grammar, it was clear, it was succinct, it was all the spelling was fine. And there is the opportunity also with the learning to be able to manufacture trust where trust isn't warranted. How do we manage that? Trust in things that don't deserve to be trust, to go back to your point again, but around the power of AI to manufacture trust.
Minister Ingabire,
I think that's a very good question, and perhaps I may not have an answer for it to anyone, but one thing that we need, and it comes back to the conversation we're having here on the panel around how do we make sure that what AI and other emerging technologies the robots are doing complements what we want to achieve. So I think the quick question is, to your point, taking the example that you're giving, they are scoring highly because it's not just grammar, it's also the way it's presenting these thoughts and the sequencing of it. The question then becomes, what can humans learn from that, so that at least we're also improving on our ability, because what with AI doing is collecting from a diverse set of people, and it's able to sort of really organize these thoughts in a very convincing way. The other thing, and I think these are kind of conversations that we have, especially in the education sector, where you're asking yourself, should schools be introducing ChatGPT? What does it mean? How do we make sure that our kids or young learners, as they're exposed to these technologies, they fully they're able to understand what's right and wrong? How do you not take away that responsibility from our brains? I think there was a study recently that MIT published where they were looking at the use of ChatGPT and human beings and realizing that actually your ability to think critically is reducing because of the huge reliance on such tools. And this is where, again, we have to come in and really train people to be able to understand what am I using such tools for, but how do I make sure that it's not taking away the responsibility for me to think critically and also to be able to learn from the process. Because if we then delegate that to the machines, this is where I think the risk, which is very possible that you raise around manufactured trust, will happen, but then even the dangers are more far-reaching than we can imagine today.
Any more questions? We've got this lady at the front.
I'm from China Times. 想提问一下，
My question is for Mr. Professor Zhu. We know that your company, you have a robotic dog, which plays a very important role in a lot of scenarios. For example, for the rescue and emergency cases. And actually, trust is utmost thing for the public and for the patients. So how do you win the trust of the public? Thank you for your question. Yes, we discussed a lot on AI, and there is a big issue when the robots go to the real world. Maybe they are not as smart or as strong as we expected. So we still need to resolve a lot of problems related to hardware and the system, because they have very complex system. How to make sure they are always robust and reliable during the long time of operation? Because now many technologies we are using are not directly related to AI. Of course, there are some rules or programs. Well, when we don't use so fancy technology, like only some rules, they work very well. But even when we try to want our robots to make decision based on the intake on site, this sometimes is difficult. For example, how can we use robots to make them understand, like this meeting hall, and so that the robot can design the pathway itself. So if there's some, but I'm sorry, the AI cannot do that easily now. So what we are doing is we do a combination between the AI and some traditional ways. And maybe in the future, we can develop a model of the world so that the AI can combine their own thinking and some rule-based programs. In this way, maybe they can work better. And the moderator asks me a question on DeepSeek. We really want our robots to understand the environment better. And of course, we will use the large language model among other, like DeepSeek, among other models. At least they can be more friendly in terms of communication and interaction. And they have richer knowledge. We do have some advance, but to really make robots think like us, it's still a long way to go. Yeah, very, very long way to go before we can get there. Yeah, thank you.
Back over here.
Hi, Thomas Crampton. I work with scientists helping to scale innovation. I was very interested by your last comment in terms of looking at AI in terms of models it can create, in terms of creating a more reliable and trustworthy forms of AI. And I'd be interested in all the panelists' thoughts on looking beyond the LLM as a model for artificial intelligence. Right now, AI is considered equal to or the same thing as LLM. And I think that people, I would like to know the development beyond the LLM model with Bayesian and other forms of artificial intelligence.
Kishor, Patil, maybe you could assist.
I think one thing I may say, just you said exactly beyond LLMs and etc. But look at autonomous, for example. I think the trust, there is awareness needs to be created overall. For example, the accidents, what you were talking about earlier, are 14 times less than a human part. And now, how many, because what happens is the way the media plays sometimes, one accident is really so blown out of proportion everywhere. So people are focused on that, while they don't understand that it's already 14 times less. So the point is, overall awareness can help in creating trust, and transparency can help in creating trust, and some regulations, I think the responsibility is, I think both in case of AI as well as autonomous is still work in progress. I mean, if you go to US, every state has a different rule who is responsible. I guess these are all emerging areas, and I think in some time there will be regulation also. So I think these things will help create trust beyond what you mentioned, day-to-day operations.
Minister Ingabire, do you have a comment on that?
There were AI.
Yes, AI is a very big concept. It's just like internet. It has a very wide coverage. Chinese government pays attention to collective AI. That is, we need to think how to combine robotics and AI. That means we need to use robotics to show the power of AI. So I think coexistence has two aspects. The first is, for example, human-like robots or a robotic dog, how they can charter their pathway in a very complex environment. Not only they need to be agile in terms of their limbs, but also they need to know that what if I jump or I have a small hop. So we need to combine all of the technologies, the sensoring and navigation and the motion system. So we can call them, this is the combination of different systems. And of course, AI will empower this system. Another one is we need to have a combination of different operation systems. And for example, the human-like robots, we can design the hands, and it is very slow, the progress, according to the very traditional way, and it's difficult to do that. But we can resolve the problem by using the data-driven and other solutions. And there are lots of R&D in this regard. And we also talk about a large language model. Well, maybe I think large language model is an interaction and a communication center for different combination of technologies, and they can provide a platform for interaction. So anyway, combination of operation system, combination of transportation system, and a platform for the combination and interaction.
Back here in the corner.
Thank you. So, Valentina, a global shaper from Portugal, and my question is that when we talk about trust, the government and the public sector still plays a major role in most of our countries. That said, we know that introducing automation is much easier in the private sector. So my question here is, what strategies can the governments adopt to catch up and foster trust through automation as effectively as we know that we can do in the private sector nowadays? Thank you.
I mean, Minister Ingabire, you touched on this a bit before,
Yes.
but is there anything the government could be learning from the private sector?
It's a very good question, because it's also coming from the fact that historically, when you look at all of these, the industrial revolutions that we've gone through, what has happened is that public sector is usually playing catch up with how fast evolving these different innovations are really happening across society. But I think you see examples like what I shared about my country, Rwanda, where even for us to be able to put in place the right regulations, we also need to lead by doing. So we can't talk about regulating the drone industry when we don't have use cases where we're already leveraging the drone technology, so that we also have a better understanding on how this technology operates, how we are deploying it, and then we have the right regulations that will enable innovation while catering for concerns around privacy and security. So I think the first one is leading by doing. We recently launched our national AI policy and strategy. We have a clear list of use cases that government is going to be deploying in terms of how we use AI to drive socioeconomic development. And we know in doing that we'll be able to be better placed in what kind of regulations we put in place that will spur innovation. The second part is also making sure we can educate people. Even within public sector, there's a lot of skilling and reskilling and learning of things that we're already used to that has to happen, but also while preparing the workforce that is going to, leverage this technology across different aspects of society. So to your point, I think the only way that we can catch up with what's happening when it comes to these emerging technologies is also making sure that we are not strictly wearing a regulatory hat and policy hat, but also implementing some of these and working through public-private partnerships to really develop these technologies.
Thank you so much to the panelists and also to our audience for some really stimulating questions. I think personally, what I've taken away from this panel is I've learned why the countries are having a differential view towards AI and robotics. I've learned why it's important that we build trust in this technology, otherwise economies are going to be left behind, and also how to start thinking about building a framework for AI risk and safety. Thank you so much to our panelists and to our audience for joining.